So we are here at the Cloud Foundry Summit in Boston, and we have with us Swarna today. Can you tell us quickly, what do you do at Cloud Foundry?
Sure. I am the community manager of the Cloud Foundry community. Work on the technology aspects and the people aspects of the community. So. Okay.
Yeah. So you said community manager, right? Mm-hmm. How do you this word is something interesting for me, that this open source community is open source community. What does a community manager does there?
It's kind of like cat herding. So just talking to people and understanding what they're doing, and also trying to understand how the community or the technology direction should be going forward. So it's kind of more like coordinating with a lot of people, and then facilitating the conversations, facilitating the right technology conversations, right project discussions, right the experiments and extension kind of project, for example. They have a lot of new ideas, so facilitating those kind of conversations, working with the right folks, and then making sure that the community feels that their voices are heard and their efforts are acknowledged and appreciated.
So how do you engage with the community? Is it like online, or you meet them in person?
Everything. So when I started the foundation, I worked remotely, and I set up a lot of video calls with pretty much every name that I could think of, or every name that I was given by the foundation and also by the rest of the folks. But I'm here at events like this. If I run into anyone from the Cloud Foundry community, I talk to them and engage with them in person, or else I drive up to Palo Alto or any kind of local area. Since I'm based in San Jose, I go meet them in person. So it's pretty much all over the place. Email, Slack, Twitter, you name it.
And who would you consider part of the community? Because there are developers, there are vendors, and there are like distributions. So who is your community?
Everybody. Everybody. It is a pretty
every stakeholder who has anything to do with is part of the community.
Yep. Anyone that's consuming Cloud Foundry technology, that's contributing, that's committing to. Pretty much everybody.
Sometimes community is often confused with the developer community. When you say community, they say, "Oh, these are the communities," but that's not true. Every stakeholder is a community member. I am a community member too, because I write about it, I cover about it. Yeah. So so you have been with Cloud Foundry for
This week marked my 6-month mark.
Is there a party tonight?
Yes, we're all gonna just veg out in the lobby.
This is interesting. I was talking to Devin, and he also said it's like couple of years.
Yes.
So like
Caitlin had her 3rd year anniversary.
Yeah. So I was like, is there any party? He said no. So I was like, why are you guys? Everybody is celebrating something, but everybody is like ditching a party. So
we'll figure something out.
Right. So how long? What has been your experience working with this community so far?
There's 2 things that I noticed and observed in this community. So for me, coming into this role, it was pretty brand new because I had no experience with this community beforehand. So I came in with a fresh set of eyes. But the first thing I noticed was it is a massive community, massive community. It's kind of like, 10,000 people, at least that I can think of, that are involved in the community in some form or fashion. And the other thing that I noticed was, everyone in this community has been doing this for a while now. So even the most exciting thing, it's kind of like, we've always been doing this. So what's the big deal about it? That's the kind of tone of voice that I have noticed in the community, that the higher standard of the technology quality or the product quality or the platform quality is kind of like expected. It's table stakes now in this community, but it's kind of like I've taken it upon me to kind of rekindle that kind of excitement that this is a big thing. This is a really big thing that we're doing, or some new cool innovative idea, like the Cred Hub Steel Toe project demo that you saw on stage. Like that was really awesome. So bringing those kind of ideas onto main stage, bringing those ideas onto other project teams as well, in front of other project teams, or trying to understand if there is like the concourse demo, so bringing other open source projects or communities into our community as well, so that we can have those kind of crossover projects or cross-community collaboration projects happening.
But while you're talking about bringing in other communities, you also had somebody from Kubernetes yesterday, and Kubernetes is kind of considered Linux of the cloud world these days. how do you interact with these I don't know what adjacent communities or external communities, but they are working very closely with the Cloud Foundry community. So how do you interact with them? How do you help them, or what can I help you get with those communities?
So my past experience also includes working in the Kubernetes community. So it's kind of like part of the family right now. I work with them in and out. I attend the community meetings regularly, Kubernetes community meetings regularly. I used to be involved.
So you trade secrets from one community to the community.
It's open source.
There is no secret, right?
There is no secret.
There is no secret.
Yeah, all the secrets are on Wikipedia, right?
All the secrets are on the GitHub page.
Yeah, exactly. All the secrets are on GitHub.
Yeah.
So I feel that kind of collaboration and that kind of just familiarity of the people across the communities helps a lot more innovation, because now I have ears on the ground for both the communities.
Yes, cross-pollination also is happening.
Exactly. It helps knowing folks over there and here. So that experience is definitely helping me, like familiarity with the Kubernetes community, knowing the people. So, and if I don't know someone, I just go to Kim Bannerman or Ken or Paris and say, hey, I have this question, whom do I reach out to? So it's been pretty helpful to work on those kind of communities. So right now, at least, my focus is also to bring the Istio community, because we've been doing a lot of project proposals work, and the Concourse team as well. Yeah.
Okay. And when you joined Cloud Foundry, was that any kind of challenge that you faced, or any problem that you came across that you had to overcome, or everything was very smooth, very fun ride from the beginning?
For me, it was a smooth and fun ride. I mean, it has been smooth and fun so far. But I think the biggest gap that at least everyone has been mentioning it to me, was that we didn't have a community, anyone in this community role to handle all these kind of either tech aspects or people aspects. Granted, the rest of the foundation staff was kind of taking on each pieces of these kind of role themselves. So it was kind of adding on to their piles as well. But there was not a single person that was dedicated or focused solely on developing the community, bringing the voices out, like amplifying the community's voice out within the community and across the community. So that was the biggest gap. So every single, even little incremental work or effort that I do has been greatly received and welcome. It gives me a lot of inspiration, motivation that, hey, it's great. It's working. Like everything that I do is going well and in the positive direction. There's also a lot of folks that I have talked to here. I think in the first 60 days, I would have had one-on-ones with at least 75, 80 people. During those calls, I'd learned that I noticed one common thing. Everyone is passionate about Cloud Foundry here.
Right.
And everyone wants to take time to give us feedback at the foundation to help us do the right thing, to help us help them, kind of a thing. So it was pretty inspirational for me that there's so many passionate voices here in the community, and just a little bit of encouragement and appreciation, it has gone a long way.
Right. And from what I have heard, that there will be some new projects coming into the Cloud Foundry.
Yep.
So the project doesn't mean just the code. Project also means a lot of developers will be coming in, a lot of influence for the company. So how do you deal with that when the new members, or how do you, let's say, I'm just naming it because I'm reading the shirt, so let's say Suze is coming up with a project. So they will bring in their own community, your own developer who have been working on this project.
Right.
So when they are coming in, does this create any kind of friction, because suddenly they are into a totally new community, new environment? So how do you deal with that?
Great example. We will stick to SUSE because the first project, at least that I experienced, was the UI, Stratus UI. It was proposed to the CAB call, during the CAB call, and then it was accepted into the incubation phase. So it was, at least I never even felt that it was a different community. I have never heard from anyone say that it looked like two communities coming together. It was kind of like a natural blend where we needed an open source UI as well. This Cloud Foundry users need an open source UI as a tool. So Stratos was a phenomenal example for us.
And most of those developers, I'm assuming, were already working in some capacity with so that's why they are coming here. So it's all. Yeah. How long have you been part of the open source world?
3, 4, I think 4 something years.
Okay. If I look back at early days when I started my journalism career, and our primary goal used to be to educate companies that why they should use open source, what are the benefits. Today, almost everybody is using open source. But that has created a new set of challenges. The challenges are that there will be X company, they're using open source, but they don't understand how the open source ecosystem works. They don't understand. I have met a lot of people on airplanes, and they're like, oh yeah, they'll see me because I always wear something to do with open source, and they say, yeah, our company does a lot of things, but our company don't send us, to these events. They don't see any value sending their developers taking 2 days off to attend. But what they don't understand is, he said, that other developers from other companies are solving the same problem in a totally different and easier way. So we are using the same open source technology, but instead of benefiting from others' work, on GitHub you can do only so much, but when you go and sit with other developers and you see all those sessions, then you totally, change your perspective. So do you also feel that, that despite this adoption of open source, there are new kind of challenges where new players who are not aware of open source work or not?
There are, market is always dynamic, and I have seen over the course of these last at least 4 years that I have been involved in the open source technologies, it has significantly changed, as you said. Mm-hmm. I think open source is kind of becoming like the default, or at least the first thing that developers go to before trying out any even enterprise solutions. Mm-hmm. The perspective about open source events has significantly changed. Mm-hmm. So my first foray into the open source communities was with OpenStack. Mm-hmm. And back then, it was more like, and I have always been on the vendor side. This is my first open source as a full-time and at a foundation kind of a job. So even back then, it was hard for, as you said, the developers at vendors to get an approval to go to these open source events, to OpenStack Summit or anywhere, unless there was a business opportunity over there. But in the past, at least 2 years, ever since Cloud Foundry and in the last 12 months that Kubernetes has picked up, it has significantly changed because IT is now driving a lot of business decisions. Right. The developers adopt certain technologies or certain open source technologies, and slowly it comes to a stage where they try and figure out how to scale that into an enterprise scale rather than switching to using the open source as an experiment and then switching to making the cut over to an enterprise solution. Sometimes, yes, they find the distros. For example, if someone starts with an open source Cloud Foundry, they may choose to go with the distro kind of to leave all the enterprise level headaches or these kind of things to the distributor. But there's at least less friction these days between the vendors feeling that the open source is a competitive or feeling that the open source solutions are competitive for them. Right. And now they feel like it's a great entry point for their business solutions, because now that the developers have gotten used to the open source technologies and the benefits of it, now it's easier for the enterprise solutions or the distros to provide value on top of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What is your message to other community managers that how they can, instead, as you said, it's like cat herding, so I don't know if you can really herd cats. That's the whole point.
I was successful in some cat herding, like the end user panel was a phenomenal success. Yeah.
So what is the right way to approach, even within companies, when they have their own development, how should they kind of promote this idea of, more collaboration, more sharing? Or have you heard the term inner source?
Yes.
Yes. Yep. So from a community manager's perspective, what message do you have for, either it's teams, how they can better, either encourage their developers or inspire them to become part of the wider community?
as you were saying, and as you were asking the question, I went back to one of the discussions this morning about getting unstuck, right? When we feel that we're not able to move forward, how do we reach out? I think it goes back to that kind of growth mindset kind of thinking where this group of development team or this group of open source developers, once they have a bright idea and they start building on it, now what's the next step? Like, where do they go from there? If we're not sure where we go from there, then we need to reach out to other teams and see how we can kind of expand this into a real business use case or to scale up into a broader or a wider adoption kind of a thing. Same goes with other community managers as well. Like, yes, we have established our technology, our platform addresses all these use cases, but what else are the users looking for? Because at the end of the day, it's all about the users. If users are not finding this beneficial for them, there's no point in having an open source community. So what are the users looking for, and how can we as open source communities come together to provide that kind of interoperable solution for the end users?
Right. I think we talked about some basic and broad topics, big overview. You think anything which is closer to your heart but we did not talk about?
The one thing that I really feel and I strongly believe in is community is always people. If the people are not happy, or if we do not appreciate the people's efforts, or if we do not talk to people, communications is extremely important. So talking to people, listening to their feedback, that helps a lot of momentum in the community in itself. So every time I say community, it's a group of people. That's what I mean. That group of people could be from a member company, from a vendor company, from an end user company, or a freelance developer using this as a kind of a hobby project, or an intern trying to branch out into their future career. But it is about people first. So one of my good friends, Kim Barrowman, always says people first, technology second.
Right.
I really strongly believe in that as well.
That's interesting, because I was talking to Brian Bellendorf a few weeks ago, and I was like, what is important? What ensures, what role people? I don't even recall if he used the word people, but I was like, how to ensure that an open source project will be sustainable. And he said, that if your open source community doesn't look as diverse as our word is, it won't survive. So his point was, that it's people, so make your community as diverse it is in a different ways possible. And Cloud Foundry is based on the user survey. It's a lot of interest in China. Same is with the case with a lot of other cloud native technologies. Since you mentioned OpenStack, last year OpenStack, they did a survey and they also translated into 7 different languages. So the feedback that they were impressed with the feedback they received compared to previous surveys, because when your survey was in Asian languages, Chinese, Mandarin, and all those languages, people were able to participate at different level and answer. So they were surprised the kind of responses they got. I talked to a lot of people from really high level companies, high level government organizations from China. They're smart people, but I could barely do the interviews because I don't speak the language they speak. So do you think, because diversity is something very, very critical to Cloud Foundry, do you think that you will also be to encourage the communities which are in these countries which are not, where English is not the first language? What are your efforts, or what you should do if there are no efforts as such to encourage the community?
Yeah, absolutely. Diversity and inclusivity are like the 2 foundation pillars for us. One of our community members, Steve Greenberg, during the unconference that we host, that the community organizes before the summit, he mentioned something that really stuck with me. It's not about bringing an underrepresented group. It's not just about giving opportunities to an underrepresented minority group or something, but it's making the community feel like it's it's open for all. Everyone is welcome here, regardless of where you are, who you are. If you're not sure where to go next, reach out to people. Or if you see someone else that seems to be in that kind of a situation where they're not sure how to go, whom to reach out to, go volunteer your time, go help them out. So making the community feel like everyone is welcome, I think, is the biggest outcome that we can expect from all these diversity and inclusivity efforts. Same goes with the localization that you mentioned. For example, taking China. That market is not familiar, or Chinese market is not going to go with English first kind of an approach. So if you're not localizing your materials, you're not targeting them. So it's kind of like going back to the marketing 101 or sales 101, right? Know your audience. Going there, we have to work with them. So we have a small group of people that we're working with in China, the Cloud Foundry Foundation, to understand the local dynamics and understanding even the routes to market, so to speak. Like, are meetups the right way to do? Like, from a community perspective, if I need to start building an active community there, are meetups the right vehicles for me? Or Cloud Foundry Day, is that the right vehicle for me? Or is it more sponsored events or member sponsored events? I'm not sure. So I'm leaning on the local team's advice to help me understand which one is the right method for them, and bringing the local speakers, local end users to kind of bring that momentum over there, then build a community. I could take, for example, an end user from the US onto China, but it might not be the relevant end user example or business use case. It's a completely different market. So we're completely relying on our local teams there, and also working with our other foundation members within the Linux Foundation umbrella to kind of see how we can share notes with each other.
I recall my interaction with Beth Quinn from Verizon, and she's also heavily into diversity. I cover diversity a lot. And she was also of opinion that when you're getting a guest from Asian countries or other countries, and when you put them on stage to deliver a keynote or speech in English, they feel uncomfortable. So let them speak their language and offer whatever translators you have for locally. That will also, so instead of just localization, also when they come here. So do you think that will also help?
That will help significantly. So Chip was mentioning earlier that when he went over to China, he literally had to present in English, but then there were local translators that were helping translate. So I think it also works the other way around, because forcing them to talk in English is not going to help.
I would love Chip to talk in Mandarin. It would
I would love to hear that too. I would pay probably out of pocket to go visit that.
I'm willing to pay the ticket.
I will pay for it myself. It's the same thing, right? If we are not comfortable learning the Chinese language and speaking in the local language there, when they come over here as a guest speaker, it's the same thing.
It will encourage more community members to participate more actively because they know that they can just be themselves.
And they can also deliver the message more passionately in their own language.
Exactly. That's what I was talking about, that when I was talking to them, they were the brilliant people, but they were struggling to convey their thoughts and ideas. And one more thing is that different cultures, they solve different problems in different ways, their unique ways. So you also benefit from their way of solving the problem versus English way of solving the problem.
That is perfectly true.
So and the beauty of open source is that anything can be done because it's driven by community, not a company.
Exactly. So and that's why I'm loving it. Yes. And these 6 months have been a phenomenal ride for me because, as you said, it's not driven by a particular company. Like yesterday, I was at a panel at the end of the last panel of the day, and after the panel, all the participating panelists, they came together and they were like, oh, this was a great discussion. Now from here, next to Basel, we're going to work on X, Y, and Z things. And then we're going to bring a much more meaningful either demo or a project idea over to that. So they have already started putting together a proposal discussion there. So those are the kind of ideas that come together when everyone meets here at these summits. And it was just eye-opening for me because these are 4 large organizations that if I start myself as one of those organizations, it would probably take me ages to get through the discussions, get through the emailing and calendaring kind of hoops. But now we're all here. We are in the panel discussion. And at the end of the discussion, we all speak. And we got an idea, and they're already off with a proposal doc. So that's how.
Was it your second Cloud Foundry Summit or the first?
full-fledged summit, this is my first.
So this is the last day today, I guess. What has been your experience so far with this? What's your takeaway? What have you learned? What have you gained?
I'm bummed out, first of all, that I couldn't go to a single session, a single breakout. But I guess this is how it works.
Same with me. I wanted to, but I've been just sitting here doing all these interviews.
Yeah, I can imagine. So,
and it's more fun to talk to people than to listen to just one person, right?
That's kind of what I'm using as my consolation as well. But I probably would have met with, again, a couple hundred people here, had one-on-one conversations, learning from them, hearing from them. For me, it's significantly different. Being part of the foundation, attending Summit was a completely different experience for me. Met with a ton of developers who have been doing this for a while. And I was also sitting at the project officer's table and just overhearing the conversations. There are so many different end user companies or member companies, just, folks from all of these companies talking to each other as if they're all part of one team. That was the biggest eye-opener for me. Regardless of what vendor hat or member hat or end user hat you wear in your day job, when you're talking about Cloud Foundry or working on these projects, they all come together as one team. And that has been the biggest eye-opener for me.
Right, yeah, and it is impressive, yeah. So. It was fun for me also, and congratulations for your 6 months and for your first summit, and it was nice talking to you today.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for the opportunity.